Welcome back to The Master's Apprentice. We're on part 2 of our conversation about the discipline of fasting. If you didn't watch part 1, please click here and go back and watch part 1 first before diving into this, where we talk about it more practically or maybe more freely, and how fasting has gone for us. But if you watched the first video, you know that Dustin said he has some pushback for me on this. But before you push back, Dustin, I want to encourage you guys, if you enjoy this content, it's been helpful, please subscribe, like, and share with those that you think might also be interested in this content. And if you have your own pushback, as Dustin's about to do to me, leave that in the comments below. Or if this has been helpful to you, please leave that in the comments below as well. All right, Dustin, I am not ready for it. I mean, I'm ready for you.
So, when we're talking about fasting, okay, historically, it has been food related. Is it possible in today's world to consider other things a form of fasting and accomplish the same thing? And can that be a practice? So when someone says, I am fasting, but I am fasting from social media, or
Right.
I am fasting from, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
But is there space to consider that fasting in today's world, just because I think mostly technology is a big deal, and you hear people taking social media fasts or like what have you. Could that be considered in this conversation?
I am so curious about whether or not we're going to have the same opinion on this, because I feel like we might not, but we will find out here in just a moment. I did not know this is where you're going with this, but I actually am glad that this is the way that you went with this. Okay. I have 2 answers to the question, not different answers. They coincide with each other.
Yes.
I set that up. I set that up. I have one answer, but there's layers to my answer. First of all, can you fast from other things besides food? Of course you can. I'll add to that to say I would encourage people to do fasts from social media. I would encourage people to even do fasts from binging their favorite shows on whatever platform. So there is even historically, to some extent, there have been believers who have, for extended periods of time, chosen to fast from something for the purpose of pursuing God in place of those things. Okay, so maybe you're going to fast from a certain hobby that you like to do, right? So down the list, but as far as an encouragement out of probably necessity, I would say, yeah, people probably should take, you can fast from your phone in some contexts, but for sure social media, for sure certain elements of entertainment, television. I'm old if I say that. I shouldn't say that.
That was pretty.
That dude, how old am I? My goodness. From streaming, is that what I say? I don't even know the proper. Well, I don't know what to call it. Entertainment. Okay, whatever. There's things you can fast from, and I think that you can do that as a means of pursuing God. However, my answer to the question is, while you can use it for the same purpose, when I'm talking about the discipline of fasting, I'm talking about it as abstaining from food, because I think that is what that is. So, in other words, when Jesus talked about it, that's what he meant. When Jesus fasted, this is what he did. When the disciples fasted, that's what they did. When the early church fasted, it was always food. That's what it always meant. there is no getting away from that. So I do believe that fasting, in the biblical sense of fasting, is talking about abstaining from food. Right? So my answer is, it is a yes and a no, to be honest with you. So if someone, for health reasons or whatnot, or concern, what I encourage them to do, instead of giving up on this discipline, find something else you can fast from.
Yeah.
So there is an exception to that, right? Like, find a replacement for it. And besides that exception, maybe you can fast from food, but you also need to fast for some other stuff too. Right. I would strongly encourage that as well. So this is where my answer is a bit confusing, is that yes, but no. Because I think historically, biblically, that fasting in the sense that we're talking about is talking about food, and that fasting from social media cannot equal fasting from food. Yeah. Because even though a fasting from social media would be so healthy and cleansing for you, and an opportunity to pursue God with more clarity, and I've done those type of fasts before too. I think that's a really good thing. But fasting from social media doesn't make me physically relate to my dependence on something. Like, I might be addicted to social media, but I'm not dependent on it. I might be addicted to my favorite, TV series, and there's that word again, streaming series, whatever, but I'm not dependent on it. And so food is a necessity for me to be able to live. And so because of that, they are entirely different things. But it is a type of fasting, but I wouldn't replace it unless there's an exception for health or for a concern of why you shouldn't abstain from food. That would be my very long answer to your question, and I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
I would say I'm probably in the middle on it. I think I would be totally. I would echo most of everything that you said. I think I would be totally okay with someone calling a break from social media a fast.
Right.
But I would not want that to become what fasting means for them. Right. If that makes sense. It's because what you're saying is true. It's fasting from food is way different than fasting from social media. And I get that we are addicted to our phones. Most of us are.
Right.
And that it can feel like a need to some extent. Right. But it is not the same. And what I would want to clarify for people, outside of those exceptions where health is at risk if you fast, I'm not talking about that. But in general, for most people that can fast from food, I would not want fasting from social media to take the place of fasting from food.
Right.
Because they are different. And while you can accomplish similar goals, there is something unique and different when it comes to the food part of fasting. And so I would encourage people, if you are going to view that as fasting with social media or phone or technology or whatever, to have a both and. I fast from this at this time, but I also fast from food at this time.
Yeah.
Right. That's how I would encourage people, because I would not want to make a hard line and say you can't consider that as fasting, but I would not want you to replace it.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I think we're probably pretty similar on that. I'm probably a little more hard-nosed about it than you are. If that wasn't kind of obvious. I would. I'm okay with what you said. I would prefer it not even to be called fasting personally. I don't know what you would call it. There's a sense in which
maybe part of your rule of life.
Yeah, like and so because I'm in favor of it. Like, an example I would give is like you could do the same thing on Sabbath. It's like, I'm going to Sabbath from social media for the day. Well, that's not really a Sabbath. You just Sabbath from one thing. Like, that's not right. Now, you could do that, and that would be a healthy thing to do, and like a good purging thing to do. And once again, a way for you to spend more time with God and everything. Like, absolutely, but equating them, I have a harder time with that.
Yeah.
With an exception. I have an exception to that where I think that maybe you could equate that when you're legitimately replacing fasting with this other thing you're going to give up. But for someone that can physically, mentally, they're in a position where they could fast from food, and they say, I'm going to fast from my favorite soda this week instead. No, yeah. that's not it. Yeah. I'll give like kind of a cheesy example, but like that's like, I'm going to fast from my McDonald's runs this week. Like, right. Well, and once again, there could be some positive ends to those things. I'm not going to argue against that. I would just push against maybe the terminology of it a bit of like, once again, the point being is, if you're able to do that, don't make an exception for what this thing is meant to be intrinsically, because it is different. And once again, I think we're in agreement fundamentally in the sense that fasting from food is fundamentally different than any other thing that you could abstain from.
Yes.
It hits different than all of it. And so if you're able to, that's the different thing. While I'm also a proponent of breaking away, cleansing from other things that could also be beneficial for you. Just don't use those as an excuse to, I did this instead. Once again, not in this legalistic kind of way either. I want to be careful how I present this. I'm just,
you're trying to protect the definition of fasting.
Yeah, I'm not just protect like what it is. Like words have meanings, things have meanings, and so words matter. So like we want to have clarity in what we mean. That being said, there's a sense in which I've used this. Once again, I'm going to use Sabbath as an example. I've done what I would call like a partial day Sabbath. Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Well, not exactly. I mean, a Sabbath is a day. Like, it can't be like part of the day. Like, that's kind of like. Right. And I know we're going to talk about that some other time. But I'm just saying, there's a sense in which I get it because I have used these in that kind of way before.
Yeah.
So.
I just wanted to bring it up.
Part of it.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring it up because that may be something that people are thinking of,
mm-hmm.
And I would just we can move on after this. I would encourage people that yes, that is a great way if you legitimately replace that with pursuing God. That is a great thing to do, and I would lump it in there just if that's helpful for someone to call it fasting.
Sure.
I would say do it. But on the other hand, do not miss out on fasting from food if it's something you can do, because they are not the same, and you won't know that unless you actually go through it, but you will know the difference.
Now,
there is a difference.
We've all done this, by the way. Anyone who's been on social media has done this. I'm just encourage you, don't do this. You don't have to post that you're taking a break from social media. I've done it. I was just thinking, by the way, I'm not going to be on the video. If your reason for doing it is because you want to pursue God better and have that distraction away, that would be like you're fasting from food, but you're making sure everyone knows that you're doing it. And I'm literally not making fun. I'm making fun of myself. I have done the exact same thing. Nobody cares that you're taking a break from social media. Just like literally nobody cares. No one's going to be like, wow, they haven't posted in a while. Are they alive? It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're a person that posts 5 times a day and you have a whole bunch of followers, then they might get worried about you. But aside from that exception, it'll be all right. Just delete the app off your phone for like a week or whatever you want to do, and it'll still be there when you get back.
So with the time we have left, let's talk practically about the food portion of
Yeah,
fasting, or if you ask some people, the only definition of fasting.
it is
Um,
the. What are you
um,
talking
uh, if
Some
someone were
people.
to,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, you're great. You're fine.
Uh, I don't want to
I
laugh
thought you
too
would
hard.
enjoy that.
I did.
Um, so, if someone were to take this on, let's say, and I think we've alluded to some things earlier in part one.
Hmm.
If someone was to take this on, what are some practical things to keep in mind? Um, and what are some things that we could share that would be helpful that we've experienced? Things that may be to keep an eye on, those kinds of things. I think that'd be good, maybe place to take this. And I do want to say right out of the gate, fasting is not one of those things that I think you should jump in with no thought. um,
No.
because if this is something you're going to practice, it needs to be part of a rhythm and a routine, as opposed to sporadic and not thoughtfully planned out. One, it's not going to be beneficial for you health wise. And two, if this is more of a sporadic thing, chances are that what we're trying to accomplish is actually not going to be accomplished. If you today just randomly decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to start the fast tonight and just go, like, if this is not something that's planned out, it's probably not going to accomplish what it needs to do. And so
Right.
you need to be carefully thinking things through and
Hmm.
planning on something like this, as opposed to a scripture reading and prayer, which we've done so far. You can jump into those pretty easily,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
Fasting, you can't. Fasting, you cannot just jump in.
No. No, I agree, Dustin. It's got to be. It requires planning. If you're married or have a family, that does involve them to a certain extent. So like,
Yeah,
you can, don't try to hide a fast from your spouse. That doesn't make any sense. For instance,
yeah,
because you'll just get frustrated because they'll keep, hey, have you had any food? Notice you haven't ate anything today. Are you hungry? Like just
yeah,
so communication is good on that on the family side of things. And then, yeah, some stuff I already alluded to in part one, Dustin, like, so plan ahead. Don't do it spontaneously. Make sure that you're drinking plenty of fluids before the fast, like plenty of water before the fast. And, and schedule your fasts around a time where you can spend more time in scripture reading and prayer.
yeah,
Don't plan it on a really busy day. Don't plan it on a family day where you're going to go out on an outing somewhere. Don't do that to yourself, or to your family, or to your coworkers, or whoever. Like do it in a way that makes sense. All of our schedules are different, and it could look different when that would happen. And so before you think of it as a I would say, Dustin, even before someone's like, okay, I'm going to make this my rhythm. Don't even be like, don't plan it and be like, all right, once a week I'm going to fast now. Like that's also way too crazy of an idea if you've never fasted before. So just plan one.
yeah,
Plan one time fasting, and maybe that one time is just one meal. Maybe it's two meals, or maybe it's a 24-hour fast.
yeah,
Whichever your first one is, take a baby step with that and plan your time of what you're going to do during your fast. Because
yeah,
otherwise, like if it's your day off from work and you're planning a fast, for instance, but you didn't plan what you're going to do during your fast, you're just going to be grumpy sitting around mad that you can't eat anything.
yep,
So if you are working, it's planning what you're going to do on your lunch break hour, or 30 minutes, whatever your lunch break time is. It's planning what you're going to do on your car ride. It's planning what you're going to do right when you get off of work. Like there's like so anyway, there's a lot of, like you're saying, a lot of planning on the practical side of that, to do it smart, for the sake of accomplishing what you're setting out to do here. Not the, plan to make sure I get through it. No, plan to actually pursue God in this fast. And so those are some simple practical ideas with that of plan out what times you're going to do what in. Like, you can do it on a work day, but plan what, depending on what type of work that you do, you can plan what times in the day that you will have time to pray focusedly. Wow, what in the world was that? Focused prayer and pursuit of God. Plan, if you want to spend time reading scripture, plan what scripture you plan on spending time in. Don't spend a bunch of time saying, I could read this, or I could just start flipping around. Like, have a plan ahead of you. Yeah. I feel like I'm rambling on, but
no, and to a certain extent, this can be pretty cut and dry of like what needs to happen. So I don't know. I don't want to belabor the point. I will say, I feel like as far as disciplines go, we are starting to get into, not that you can't have that, not that you shouldn't have a plan for Bible reading and prayer, but I think we're starting to get into the disciplines where it's absolutely necessary to have a plan. Otherwise, it will not accomplish what you're wanting it to.
Yep.
We're starting to get into those disciplines, and this is the first of them.
Yes.
To where you need to have a plan. Otherwise, you are just going to be sitting around at home, ticked off that you can't eat, and
right.
grumpy and yelling at kids or getting frustrated easily. If you don't plan things out ahead of time, it's not going to accomplish what you're wanting it to accomplish. And I don't want to, you got something to say?
Yeah, it just kind of hit me too. Like, if you don't already have a discipline of prayer, I don't know that I would encourage you to try fasting yet.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that was kind of hitting me, because like, if you don't really have any type of prayer life, fasting will be even harder.
Yeah.
And this is no knock on you. This is just like, if
right.
you don't really know how to pray yet, like if that's still something that you're practicing and working on and learning and practicing prayer, or maybe maybe that's still new to you.
Yeah.
Don't dive into this one, because you won't know what to do with yourself. Because what I would say practically for me, I take those urges of hunger and desire and place them to this desire for God, and I direct it towards the Father. Like, that's what I do with those urges. But if you struggle with prayer as it is, you won't know what to do with those urges, because you don't even know exactly how to have a discipline of prayer when your belly's full, like when you feel good. So is that a fair thing to kind of mention there? Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it would be really hard. It would be really hard if you haven't already had some sort of discipline of prayer implemented. Because I'm still working on a discipline of prayer. So I don't mean like you've got it figured out.
Having mastered it.
I don't mean mastered it. I just mean you're practicing it to a certain extent. Like you
right.
You have a somewhat of a discipline of prayer, and then fasting can be this next extension of that, or a part of an extension of that. So, I thought that might be a helpful thing to point out.
Yeah, I would probably just go ahead and lump Bible reading in there as well, because, and I think I like the way we did the order of this, because I do think if you are able to get Bible reading and prayer down, it opens up all of these other disciplines that are going to be part of it and interconnecting. And so I think it's definitely foundational to have that. And if that's not part of your rhythm now, it may be more beneficial to focus on those two things first. Absolutely. And then come to these, because if you don't really have prayer down to a point where you're practicing it and you're not really in scripture, what are you going to do during your time? Like right. if you're not trying to commune with God, if you're not trying to read from the Bible, like what are you trying to do?
Right.
You are just going to be sitting there. So
right.
Yep. Definitely a good point. How much time do we have? Because I've got a couple of things.
We got like 5 minutes.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah. We've been burning right through this 30 minutes.
So I have two things, and I'll let you decide which one you want to answer.
Okay.
When it comes to fasting, what has your experience been going through it? Like, what are some things that have...
Sorry.
It's great.
Go ahead.
Let's talk spiritually.
Oh, okay.
What, having gone through it, how have you seen it benefit you? Like, what has your experience been? So we can go that direction. Or why do you think we don't fast?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. We don't fast because it stinks. Like it's if you, I mean, well, first I shouldn't say that. First of all, I should say some of us don't fast because we've never even heard of the concept, or didn't even know that was something to outside of like the people talking about like health fasting or like doing for like
sure.
diet type fasting. So a lot of people haven't even heard about it. You know, whether you're a believer, a new believer, not a believer at all, like this idea of connecting with God through fasting or spending time with God through fasting, I think first of all might be just a foreign concept. But for those of us that are aware of fasting or now are learning about fasting, the reason why we will neglect it or not do it, the reason why the very first time that you're trying to do it, you'll fight against it, even when you're trying to plan it, is because it's hard. Like, it's not an easy discipline. It's not an easy practice because of our dependence and necessity on food. We don't like how it makes us feel. And so that's why we don't do it. I don't know that there's a negative spiritual reason why it's avoided. I think it's just avoided because it's hard. Like, so even if you know the benefit of it, you still struggle to want to do it because it's like, man, but I'm hungry. Like, I gotta eat food. So that's my kind of quick answer to that. And then to answer the other question of like personal benefit or experience with it, I've already said it kind of a few times that is my personal experience with it, is that it has made me more hungry for God. So like while I'm hungry for food, it has made me more hungry for God. It has grown my faith. It has grown my understanding of my dependency on Him, because food comes from God ultimately.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, that came from the farmers and from like, and where did that come from? The ground. Okay. So, and where did the rain come from? Okay. Right. Like all these things, like ultimately, food is a gift from God. And so when we realize that we can't have it, it's like, oh man, I'm dependent on God for food and also for my spiritual health, to be with God. Like I'm dependent on that. That's the positive. I think I've said that several times now. That's been my ultimate experience with it. But not every time I fast does it go that way. I have done a 24-hour fast where my plan didn't go the way that I expected. I didn't get to spend as much time on focused prayer as I intended. I didn't get as much time in solitude as I intended. I didn't get to be in scripture the way that I intended because of life. It got interrupted.
Yeah.
And I've had fasts end where I've said, well, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
I just was hangry for a day for no reason.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily true, right? It's not that I didn't have moments that where I was pursuing God, but it didn't go the way. And so I want to share realistic expectations is that, well, I think overall that you'll find a net positive of drawing you close to God. It might not feel that way the first time. And even if you get a practice of it, you might have times where, man, this accomplished what I set out to do. I spent this intimate time with God, drew close to him in his word, close to him through prayer. And then the next time it might be like, oh man, like this did not go. And that's the same for any of the disciplines, by the way, is that you won't always have the feels of it feeling this way or this, but we would argue that these tools draw us close to Jesus, even when we don't fully sense it or realize it. It's the habit of these disciplines as a means to be with him. And the example I'll give with that, and then I'll throw it back, these same things right back to you, Dustin, to respond to, is the disciplines that of family routines that we have, of our family night or like date night with my spouse. Some family nights with our kids, and for us, like it's like we usually play like a board game or a card game. Sometimes they end in arguments and fights.
Yeah.
Because I have some really competitive kids and I'm also very competitive. And sometimes in the moment, it's like, oh man, this family night, I'm not feeling it. Like this is supposed to draw us closer to each other and love and like connection with each other. And in the moment, so I was like, man, that was a total, but then usually the next day, the kids are like, that was the best family night ever. Like that was amazing. Right. And sometimes if I'm on a date with my wife, sometimes it's romantic and nice and sweet and we're connecting with each other. Other times we're spending an hour or 2 hours together and it was nice, but we spent time together, but like it wasn't super romantic or like we didn't have like some super special connection or like we didn't have some sort of like breakthrough or like we're just improved in our marriage significantly but there's this net positive of every family night isn't amazing. Every date night isn't amazing, but the net positive is overall good, even when you don't feel it in that moment or sense it in the moment. Same thing with fasting or any of the spiritual disciplines. Even if the moment doesn't feel like you got to the ends with it, which we should desire that, but sometimes it's the bigger picture through those things. Anyway, I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
But we'll kick those same things back to you.
Yeah, I think I would pretty much echo what you said. I think not to get too like just practical, but if you just look at this, if you're only doing something once in a while, the law of averages of you having that feeling or getting to the end, like if it's once in a while, the odds of you not getting there are much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if this is a sporadic thing here or there, you're probably going to experience that more.
Right.
But if you get into this regular rhythm and routine of practicing, as you said, even on those times that maybe you didn't feel quite right or you didn't feel like you got through your plan or whatever.
Right.
It is still a net positive, even for the simple fact that you're still keeping that in a rhythm routine. And once again, these are opportunities to be with God.
And they don't all look the same and they don't all feel the same.
They do not. They do not. Just like it would be with your wife on a date night. It's not always going to look the same. But
same thing with any of our conversations here on this podcast or when we talked on the phone. All of our conversations aren't the same.
Right.
Right? And that's neither a negative or a positive statement. Like they're different. They're all different.
Right. So to me, the win is you did it. You are making it part of your rhythm. And God will meet you there. And even when you don't feel like it, God meets you there.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, you can't base everything off of feeling. Those are nice for validation. But I guarantee you that if you had a month straight of that and no feeling, you look on it after a month and you're, wow, I'm in a better place, right? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Net
so
positive.
yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't base everything off the feeling or how well the plan was accomplished, but like, you know, acknowledging that those are great, and it's nice to have that validation, but don't give up.
Yeah.
If that is something that you encounter, keep going, keep trudging through, keep entering those spaces where you can be with God. And I promise, as Caleb said, that will be a net positive for you. You just got to trust and make that part of your rhythm and routine. Um, yeah, I think fasting is difficult for everybody because at the end of the day, we're denying our flesh,
Yeah.
and we're we've always been in this world, but it seems much easier now for self gratification as opposed to self denial.
Right.
Um, it's just it's all about what makes you happy, what makes you feel good. If you want it, get it. If you yeah, it's just that is all over. And with fasting, we are denying not just our flesh and our wants, but an actual need. We need food, and so that part is really hard because we're used to getting food. We're used to having good food,
Yeah.
and it's a way to gratify our flesh and our desires.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this practice, while it's not the primary, a secondary is we are we are saying no to our flesh and putting that in subjection and saying no, I need something better.
Yeah.
And getting into that rhythm and routine is actually really helpful when you are talking about the spiritual disciplines, because a lot of it is putting our flesh under subjection and feeding our spirit, not just in a practical sense, but it's just, I don't know. I feel like fasting can help open the door on some of these other things, to say no to what your flesh wants and what you want in the moment, and saying yes to your spirit.
Yeah. That's good. Anything else, Dustin?
No, I can't think of anything. I think we covered the bases pretty well.
Well, all I'll say is this is we have some options of where we go next. What I would have next, and we can do something different, but I'll go ahead and just throw this out there, is community is what I have next. But we don't have to go there. We have other options. But I will say this, if we do go into community, and honest with our listeners here, that'll probably be more than one episode.
Yeah.
If I had to guess. And that might be a natural flow for our next stop. But we can talk more about that off air to see if that's where we want to go next. But maybe that's where we'll be next time.
Leave them with some suspense there.
Leave us with some suspense. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us over at part 2. Once again, if you didn't watch part 1 of this conversation on fasting, please go back and watch that first. Or maybe this is the very first video you've clicked on ever. We have a whole bunch of other content we've already put out. Hope those can be help to you. If this content is helpful to you, please subscribe, like, and share. And if you would most importantly, please give us feedback. If this was helpful, write in the comments what exactly was helpful. Or if it was a little confusing or you wanted clarity on something, write that in the comments below too, and we'll do our best to get back to you and to bring clarity to that. And we look forward to having these conversations as we're all on this journey together. Dustin and I have definitely not mastered anything. We are apprentices. We are still wanting to be more and more like Jesus and growing in these disciplines specifically. So yeah, not experts in the field or anything like that. And so that's the same thing with this podcasting. Like, We're growing on that front as well, and learning how to podcast and how to do these videos, and maybe one day we'll do a live stream. Who knows? But we're like probably a ways out from that. But
take live questions.
Yeah, take live questions. That'd be fun. Never say never. And so we're growing on what that looks like for us as well. And so if you have any opinions about that either, of like the quality of the podcast, whether from the sound, the video, just say it all just say it sounds and looks great. I'd appreciate it. Yeah, you please feel free to give us feedback on that. I already know the stuff I'd like to be better, but you can go ahead and post it on there too, so I can feel doubly bad about it. Anyway, any last words from you, Dustin, or are we good to go?
No, come next time, and we'll see what we're talking about.
We'll find out. Dun dun dun. See you guys next time.
See ya.